This is WPAZ's Community Soapbox, where you get to hear from people in our community who serve our community. And today, as our guest, we have Ed Huppel, activist, and also the official coffee roaster for Kimberton Whole Foods.
Hi, Brian. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Beforehand, we had a chance to talk a little bit about coffee and how it's a world commodity, and you were saying how coffee connects so much to the rest of the world. It's not just our morning drink to stimulate us, but it's also, well, it's a product that has world consequences to it as well.
There's so much going on in coffee that it's a study in everything, because if you simply start with where it's grown where global warming is having some of the strongest impact. Equatorial regions have been great for coffee. They're scorching out. Between the two tropics, where classic coffee growing range is now, some of those at the extremes are getting hot like the equator used to be. There's water issues everywhere, and so in all these places where there are water issues for coffee, there are serious political issues for water, for stability, for all the things that are going on in the world right now. You know, food revolutions, commodity spikes, and everything else. As coffee needs to push into other territories, and you know, it's a valuable product, so people will always want to do it. It kind of comes as no surprise. A couple of years ago, Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks and the CEO of Boeing, and somebody else, I mean, I don't even remember who, all went to Beijing on the same jet together. And I thought, what's up with that? And then, then they came Starbucks in Forbidden City, and all this stuff happened. But right now, what the real payoff on it is that Starbucks is helping China build coffee fields in Yunnan, because there's a zone where China never cared about coffee, but it was arable for coffee, temperate for coffee. Can you believe that for centuries, Brazil contributed most of the coffee to the world, and that they were displaced within a couple growing seasons by Vietnam?
I had heard that, yes, that the Vietnamese government made a major effort to be the world exporter of coffee because it was a cash crop available to them.
Well, I understand that Honduras is doing that kind of thing right now, and whereas Vietnam has especially focused on the most machine processable and mainstream varieties of coffee, which is fine. That's exactly what they're aiming at. The Honduran effort is having more to do with focusing on providing the specialty coffee industry with the sort of mellower, sweeter beans that you're used to at coffee houses you enjoy.
Now,
so they're making a business decision too. We're going to aim for this part. Look, everybody else, people are starting to fall down this way and that. And we're going to run to the end zone, We're going to run there with organic fair trade coffee,
Two questions then. One, with this world change of cropland and arable zones for coffee, does that explain part of why the price has been going up so much lately?
Well, there's two for sure reasons that's going up. In part, and partly it's exactly what you say, including but there've always been hurricane seasons that were intense. Now there's more and more hurricane seasons, it seems, but there's always been a increase of natural supply and demand increase and a correction, and this past year it went so much farther beyond that, pretty crazy, that it was driven, and still is driven, primarily by speculators using coffee hedge funds when they essentially have, but they're getting regulated out of other things.
So the demand hasn't really gone up that much. The supply hasn't shrunk that much, but
both.
It's a matter.
All three.
Oh, okay.
So, but the major head of the hydra has been the speculation thing, because and in a weird way, it has benefited farmers because, well, the coffee hedge funds have been around as long as the cocoa and sugar exchange and whatever else in New York bygone days.
So it goes to the mid 1800s. Yes.
Sure. The hedge funds are so that producers can weather bad weather, so that whatever else is going on in the market, you can, the roasters or distributors, retailers here can also find,
supply.
Right. So they're good. The bad years balance out, and that system is certainly capable of been having gamed many times in many different ways over those years, right? But right now, it's being gamed in such a high volume, big money invested way that they can create speculations on these futures markets and continuously scoop the froth, to out of it. But what happens is the farmer is actually getting paid more during this time, and that there are aspects of the whole chain of custody where this price has gone up, but essentially, it's some part of it has gone to the farmer. Thank heavens.
Though the way you're talking, it sounds like it was more by coincidence than design.
Yes.
The other question I had was about organic fair trade coffee. Now, Kimberton Foods is involved with that, and you were telling me some of the social benefits of fair trade coffee.
Certainly, the what we started putting on the label recently is sustainably grown, ethically sourced, and there's a. I'm not trying to knock it for what good it has done to anybody, but there is a USDA organic program that is expensive to be part of. It takes a lot of record keeping, and that seems to become a political football at times as people argue over whether genetically modified organisms can be organic and so forth. And at a certain point, you tend to want to say, do I know where I'm buying my coffee? What are they doing? And are they, and if they are, it's sort of business again. Most big plantations and cooperatives that want a part of the North American apple pie for coffee, because we consume an awful lot of it, our market has looked to them for years for sustainable alternatives, for water reclamation, for fair treatment of workers and stuff like that. And so in a way, these companies that are bonding together on one Nicaraguan mountain, 5 farms, and they're not necessarily certified by some organization, which is often paying a bureaucracy, they are doing exactly what you'd most hope for in the most, that they can create a clinic for migrant workers, because coffee is still picked mostly by migrant workers, and that they can make the housing more, they can give the worker more voice. They can do all these things, and it makes them attractive to our market. So that in some ways, doing the right thing is easier to come by in coffee than it used to be.
And people are willing to pay the extra, knowing that it not only supports their morning habit, it also supports their conscience.
Well, we're sure willing to pay a little more for it, and that's what consumers come to the stores to look for.
One question back to Vietnam with their coffee trade. Does coffee help, like land that has been damaged ecologically, does that help bring that land back again? Because I remember reading someplace where they had for a long time had grown eucalyptus in places that were devastated by Agent Orange, because that was one of the few things that would grow there and help reclaim the land. Is coffee that kind of a plant?
Well, that's interesting. When you get an agronomist in to ask, let me know. And because it's interesting that I used to know a fellow who taught a compost program at a school, as well as it had some profound insights into composting. And he considered coffee grounds or anything I could give him, beans, chaff from the roasting, one of the most nutrient-rich things you could add to your own compost.
Okay.
So by all means, keep everything. Even if you've got those little instant ones, you scrape them out, and they're great. So in that way, could the coffee tree provide an especially rich humus or something to the soil? Maybe. I don't really know.
The other thing, too, on the other end of the coffee trade, and you had been mentioning this, several new businesses that have recently opened up, and they're providing organic treats to go along with the coffee. It's fair trade coffee, but it's also food that's basically good for you.
Mm-hmm. It's the whole appreciation of those standards I mentioned in the label of sustainably grown, ethically sourced is just good for everyone. And this is to get to be more green businesses, more. There's a trends prediction company where you spend a big subscription. I don't spend it, but at least the people I know do. And it's like there's an assumption that in 20 years or so, 50 or 60% of food sold is going to be organic. It's better sense for it to be organic. It's more sustaining to your own organism. It's more renewable for the earth. And then as tweaked petrochemical agents get more and more expensive, then finding out how to grow by the cycles of the moon and compost your coffee is going to help.
Well, that would make good sense. With that kind of growth, though, in organic foods, the economies of scale, that should bring the price of organic foods down, make it more affordable for everyone.
Yes, that's so important because because we haven't got that now. All kinds of wonderfully informative programs can be brought to schools, and sometimes in neighborhoods where the families can't even possibly follow through. What's the use of a field trip to Whole Foods to see products that they can't themselves buy?
Yes.
It's really teaching people to use food in a whole ingredient way and find food that's grown locally, find food that's grown around them. And I trust to a local feeling more than an organic one. I mean, I want to see mindful, local, natural, local, and stuff like that. But again, it's the same as before. It's hard to care about the certifications sometimes. But when you know other people or you know where it's being grown or it's part of your region, it's part of you and the birds and the bees where you live. It's good to find as much local food as possible.
Now, Kimberton Foods, they incorporate many of the local farmers with their products.
Historically, they've been way in advance of that. And I'm glad to see that a lot of the a lot of the more commercial stores that have followed this practice too. But for years, Kimberton has helped farms transition to organic and has been a ready receiver for their supplies.
Well, one more thing back to coffee, being that's part of your profession there, and it's also the second most traded commodity throughout the world, right there, just behind oil. Mm-hmm. What future do you see in coffee in the next 10 years?
Well, the Vietnam and Brazil analogy kind of helps you understand that Brazil can be a pretty big country, and not much of it has to be dedicated for coffee for a lot to come out of there. And Vietnam's so small. So these other areas will be found as temperature change happens. But I kind of see a strange stratification is going to occur, that there's going to be kinds of